And now, a big question this evening, is the notorious Rolex Gang back? Well, police certainly think so. They say they're hot on the gang's heels to end the criminal enterprise once and for all.
Kevin Ludidi, the leader of the Rolex Gang, who was once feared across South Africa, was driving through the dark streets when he noticed something was off. A black SUV had been following him for miles. The police were the first thing that came to mind, but as the car got closer, he realized this was much worse. He couldn't do anything because his tires screeched to a stop, blocked from the front and back. Armed men in dark clothing rushed toward his car. The next few minutes unfolded into the very thing Ludidi had spent his entire life trying to prevent. Kelvin Ludidi was born into a world where breaking the rules was the only way to stay alive. Crime was more of a way of life for him growing up in one of Johannesburg's worst townships, not just a way to get away from things. He learned about gang culture early on by watching older boys break into homes and steal cars, then running away before the police arrived. Before he was a teen, Ludidi had already made a name for himself in the criminal underworld. In the beginning, he robbed people on the street, taking their wallets and cell phones. But Ludidi wasn't careless like other street criminals. He was always one step ahead, patient and smart. When he joined a group of car thieves, it was his first real taste of power. They were experts at stealing expensive cars, taking apart cars for parts, and selling stripped cars on the black market. During this time, he learned how to avoid being caught by the police, pay off the right people, and work in the shadows. Over 16 times, Ludidi was caught between 1995 and 2009. He was always free to walk. The police knew his name, detectives were building cases against him, and prosecutors wanted to jail him. However, Ludidi found a way to get through the holes every time the handcuffs were taken off. Some say he paid police officers with a lot of power. Some people say he was just too smart because he never left evidence, never kept stolen items for too long, and never dealt with people who might turn against him. What is real? A little of both. With his money, power, and a network of dishonest government officials, he was able to stay on the streets. Ludidi went from being a street thug to a criminal genius by the early 2000s. Other people didn't see the chance, but he did. The rich and powerful people in Johannesburg loved to show off their money, especially on their wrists. As much as they were expensive, Rolex watches were also a sign of wealth. They were like gold to Ludidi. He began the Rolex Gang at this point. Under his leadership, the gang became known for being quick, accurate, and cruel. They scared everyone in the city, not just stole watches. But what really made them dangerous was how brave they were. They were no longer hiding in the dark. They struck in broad daylight, right in front of security cameras, without giving any thought to what might happen. It also worked for a while. While Ludidi was building his empire, it started to fall apart. For more than 10 years, no one could get close to the Rolex Gang. Unlike random acts of violence, their crimes were carefully planned and carried out. They were more like military operations. In this way, they got this done. Accuracy was at the heart of how the Rolex Gang worked. Spotters worked in high-end stores and restaurants near Sandton, Rosebank, and Hyde Park to look for rich people. They trained their eyes on their targets and paid attention to things like the shine of a Rolex, the smoothness of a luxury car, or the sureness of someone wearing designer labels. These signs pointed to someone who would be easy to pay off, and once they were picked, the victim had no idea they were being watched. Once a target was found, the real game began. It took the gang miles to catch their victims because they were always waiting for the right time to attack. They would sometimes sneak up on people in their own driveways when they weren't paying attention. They went home with people. Sometimes they went after parking lots, picking spots where there were no clear escape routes and where anyone would probably be able to help. When it came, the attack was quick and cruel. When 2 or 3 men in masks came up behind them with their on, they would move with the confidence that comes from knowing that fear was on their side. Being hit in the ribs with a or being told to hand it over left victims with few choices. People who hesitated were beaten, and anyone who spoke out against them could be right away. As soon as they got the watch, they were gone. Nearby, engines were roaring, and thieves were getting ready to leave before police arrived. They knew Johannesburg's streets better than most people, so they could deal with traffic and switch cars at safe houses that were approved. Before police could figure out what had happened, the stolen watches were already being taken out of the country illegally. During their time of terror, a lot of people were scared. They went after South Africa's rich and powerful to show that status and money were no defense. Adrian Gore, CEO of Discovery Holdings, and Billy Gundelfinger, a famous divorce lawyer from across the country, were 2 of their victims. Even the former government minister, Tokyo Sexwell's wife, was by the gang. Every attack shook the city and scared the rich and powerful. If wealthy men with private security and well-known contacts were not safe, then who was? The gang's brazenness got even worse as they attacked in broad daylight, right in front of security guards, and even at red lights. It looked like nothing could stop them, even if their crimes were not in the news. For years, no one could stop them because they knew that the police were either too weak or too slow to stop them. People talked about them in the halls of power and on the streets of Johannesburg because they could disappear without a trace. But even the most careful criminals make mistakes from time to time. Kelvin Ludidi, the genius behind the plan, was realizing that time was coming up faster than he thought. Under his leadership, the Rolex Gang became a nightmare for the wealthy. Their fearless daylight robberies made headlines, but law enforcement couldn't pin him down. Every attempt to arrest him ended in bribed officers or key witnesses retracting their statements. The police force looked weak and ineffective in the eyes of the public. By 2012, things changed. The gang's high-profile targets, business moguls, celebrities, and politicians demanded action. Pressure from the government and media forced law enforcement to step up. The National Intelligence Agency took over the case. A specialized task force was formed, free from corruption and leaks. Their only mission? Bring Kelvin Ludidi down. They studied his patterns, watching and waiting for the perfect moment. Then came the breakthrough. A desperate informant offered crucial intel in exchange for immunity. Ludidi had become reckless, believing he was invincible. Surveillance teams tracked his every move. On February 9, 2012, the task force received a report. Ludidi was spotted in Midrand. He was traveling in a white Ford Bantam with an unknown accomplice. Officers moved into position. A marked police vehicle was called in for a routine stop. The officers flicked on their lights and siren. Ludidi's vehicle slowed down as if complying. Then, he slammed on the gas. The chase was on. The white Ford Bantam tore through the streets of Midrand. Ludidi and his accomplice weaved between cars, running red lights. The police stayed close, but kept their distance. They knew this wouldn't end peacefully. Then, the accomplice leaned out of the window and at the officers. A ripped through a police windshield, missing an officer's head by inches. The police returned instantly. Echoed through the streets. Pedestrians ducked for cover. Drivers panicked, swerving their cars to escape the chaos. Ludidi's escape routes were closing fast. Ahead, a police roadblock. Behind, sirens closing in. Ludidi had one last option. He veered off-road into a construction site. Bad move. The terrain was rough, filled with debris and loose gravel. The Ford Bantam lost control, skidding out of control. It slammed into a concrete barrier. The officers moved in fast. Ludidi and his partner staggered out, still in hand. They opened one last time. The police didn't hesitate. Rained down. Ludidi tried to run, but his body betrayed him. A final struck him down. The most feared Rolex gang boss was no more. His accomplice escaped into the night. Some say he vanished forever. Others believe he took over the gang. But Ludidi's reign was over. Lieutenant Colonel Katlego Mogale confirmed the news. The reign of the Rolex gang boss is over, he declared. The police had finally won the battle. But questions still remained. Had Ludidi truly that night? Some believed it was another trick, a way to escape justice once again. The Rolex gang's empire was shaken, but not destroyed. The legend of Kelvin Ludidi would live on. Kelvin Ludidi's sent shockwaves through the Rolex gang. For years, he had been the undisputed leader, orchestrating high-profile robberies with precision. His ability to evade capture had made him a legend in the criminal underworld. But with him gone, the entire network began to collapse. Paranoia spread like wildfire among his men. Who would be next? Who had sold Ludidi out to the police? Some gang members suspected each other, fearing there was a traitor in their midst. Others believed the police were closing in, making South Africa too dangerous to operate. Many of Ludidi's most trusted associates fled the country. They disappeared into neighboring nations, hoping to escape justice. Some relocated to Zimbabwe and Mozambique, using their connections to start over. But even across the border, they could never truly relax. Others tried to carry on without him, refusing to accept the gang was falling apart. But Ludidi was the glue that held everything together. Without his leadership, the gang's once organized operations became sloppy. More gang members started getting caught. Between 2014 and 2016, a new wave of arrests targeted the remaining Rolex gang members. Beta Mfikileni, Saifo Mabundla, and George Mulaudzi were among those caught. They were found guilty of multiple robberies, attempted and possession of illegal arms. Their combined sentence, a staggering 682 years in prison. It was one of the biggest takedowns in South Africa's criminal history. The police had finally crippled what remained of Ludidi's empire. But was it truly over? Despite these major victories, Rolex gang-style crimes didn't vanish. New criminals studied the gang's tactics, hoping to revive the operation. Even with key figures in prison, Rolex robberies still made headlines. The police had won a battle, but the war against luxury watch theft was far from over. Even after Kelvin Ludidi's Rolex watch owners remained prime targets. The gang's fearsome reputation still loomed over the country. Though their operations were less organized, their tactics had been copied and refined by new criminals. The police continued their fight, conducting raids and making arrests, but no matter how many syndicates were dismantled, new groups emerged. The Rolex Gang name lived on, even if the original members were gone. Criminals adapted their tactics, learning from past mistakes. They became more discreet, avoiding the aggressive, reckless methods that got Ludidi. Some expanded their targets, robbing victims of more than just watches. Despite ongoing police efforts, Rolex gang robberies still happened. The difference? These new criminals were smarter, harder to catch. The police had evolved too, but the cycle of crime never truly stopped. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.